Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. I'm so glad you're here. And today I thought I would make some decorative orbs, and I wanted to do these in a Hocus Pocus theme. So these are going to suggest the characters in Hocus Pocus. And to make these, I'm going to use some of these wiffle balls, which I got at the Dollar Tree, and I'm also going to use different sizes of styrofoam balls. You can certainly make these entirely with styrofoam balls. So let's start with the fabric covered spheres, and that's the Sanderson sisters and Binx the cat. And to do that, I'm going to make a pattern so that I can cover each ball with 6 pieces of fabric. And I'm basically following a video that I'm going to link here for how to make these pattern pieces. But the difference between how I'm doing this and how it's done in the video is she has chosen a size that's easily divisible by 6. And the size of my spheres is not easily divisible by 6. So instead of measuring in some places, I am folding. So I am going to do Winifred with one of the wiffle balls. These are the largest balls that I have. So I'm making a pattern now for the wiffle ball, which is 9.5 inches in diameter. Now for Winifred, I have this turquoise fat quarter from the Dollar Tree. And I also have some purple velvety ribbon from the Dollar Tree, which I got last year around Halloween. I'm going to cut 8 pieces of the green and 2 pieces of the purple. And then I'm just going to hot glue these down to the ball. So starting with the purple, and I do want the green to overlap the purple a little bit. So do the purple, and you could do the purple each opposite each other, and then do the green in between. I didn't do it in that order here, but that's how I ended up doing it later. Winifred was the first ball that I made. So once you've done that, you'll have the 2 purple pieces opposite each other with 2 green pieces in between on each side. And now I'm going to give it a sort of a laced bodice with some gold ribbon. And I'm going to use 2 sizes of gold ribbon. I'm going to use 1/8 inch to do the laces. And I'm just cutting and gluing those down the purple in little X's. And then I'm going to use pieces of the 1/4 inch to just cover up that seam where the edge of the X's are, where the purple meets the turquoise. And do that for both sides. And then to cover the seam between the 2 green pieces, I'm going to use the other 2 green pieces that I cut. And I'm going to cut little slits along the edge of each of those pieces and fold them over and glue them, so just to make a sort of seam, and then glue that on top of the middle seam of the 2 green pieces. And that's Winifred. Now this is just a suggestion of Winifred, so of course you might want to make different choices. I just wanted to have balls that were basically the colors of the 3 witches and maybe gave a little bit of a sense of their character. So this is what I chose. Now for Mary and Sarah, I'm going to use a slightly smaller ball, and I'm going to use styrofoam for these, and I do need the styrofoam for Sarah. And these are 2.8 inch in diameter. So I'll just need to make a new pattern for them. And I went to Joann's and just looked through the last chance fabric, which was 70% off. And Joann's will cut 1/8 of a yard for you. That's the smallest size that they'll cut. So I just got 1/8 of a yard of several different fabrics to do the other sisters and Binx. I got this beautiful, sort of a stretchy maroon fabric. It looks a little bit like corduroy, but it's stretchy. And I also got this gauzy fabric with sparkles. So for Sarah, I'm going to do 2 pieces of purple and then 4 pieces of the maroon. And I'm going to glue them on the ball in the same configuration that I did for Winifred, with the purple opposite each other and the 2 pieces of maroon between. And then I just took some of this gauzy fabric and I pinned it to the top, so it's that 1/8 of a yard width. Gathered it and pinned it at the top and put it over the maroon part, a little bit away from the ball, and then I gathered and pinned it at the bottom, and then continued around the ball, cut it, and then unpinned and repinned at the top. So it just gives a sense of, I feel, Sarah's airy qualities, and it's beautiful. Now for Mary, I looked all through the store for something that looked like the patterned fabric on her skirt. To me, it looked like a tartan, although I know it isn't. And then I found this tartan, which was exactly what I was picturing, exactly what I wanted. This is actually an Eddie Bauer fabric. It was not in the Last Chance Fabrics. But all together, all of the fabric that I bought, these little pieces from Joann, were around $2. So for Mary, I'm going to do the same thing, except instead of the purple velvet ribbon, I'm going to use the Eddie Bauer tartan, and then between those pieces, the maroon. And now for Mary, I'm going to give her a little bit of lacing. She has some red lacing on her dress, and I'm going to use this maroonish ribbon that I have. It's a little too thick, so I'm just going to cut it in half and give her a little lacing on each side of the ball, sort of on opposite sides, like a playing card. And then I'm going to cover those seams with the full width of the ribbon. Now for Binx, I am going to use the same size styrofoam ball. And probably, you know, Binx is a cat, you would probably want to use a smaller ball. I just decided to use the larger ball because I was lazy and I wouldn't have to make a new pattern for that. Now I did get this black faux fur. This is very expensive. It's like $30 a yard, but this one happened to be on the Last Chance, and I only got 1/8 of a yard. So this was part of that around $2 of fabric that I bought for this project. So I'm going to completely cover a ball in the faux fur. So I'm going to cut 6 pieces of the pattern out of the faux fur. And we're going to glue that on, just like with the others, except the fur will cover any mistakes that we make. And then I'm going to use some felt for his features. So I have this felt in Limbo Lime, which I think is a good color for his eyes. And I'm also going to use some black felt for his pupils and for ears. And it's important that we make him out of styrofoam because I'm going to attach these with pins. So I just sort of traced out a cat's eye shape on the felt and cut that out, and then I cut out some pupils out of the black, and I just pinned those onto his face, and then I cut 2 ears, and I pinned those each in 2 places onto his head. Now, I thought we needed some filler for this bowl, so I thought I would make some orbs that look sort of like candles, drippy candles, and we can do the black flame candle here. So I'm going to use, again, just some styrofoam balls. These are 1.9 inches, and I'm going to start by covering them with Mod Podge. And once that's dried, we're going to use hot glue for the drips. So I'm going to pick a part of the ball that would be the top of the candle and a part that would be the bottom. And in a ring around the top, I'm going to hot glue sort of a ring and also drips that go most of the way down the ball. And then once those have cooled, we do a second layer, which is sort of between, which isn't as long, but you can also go over the original ones. And then I also did a third and fourth layer, each layer getting shorter and overlapping the other layers. And this gives us a drippy wax look, or it will once we've painted it. So once the glue has cooled, to paint those, I'm going to take some white latex paint and mix into that a little bit of yellow and a little bit of Mississippi mud brown. This is sort of a light brown, almost a tan. And that's going to give me, I think, a waxy sort of color, not too clean, not too bright. And one thing I've found with making drippy candles is it can be quite hard to get the paint into all of those nooks and crannies. So I'm wearing a glove and I have a stiff paintbrush here, and I'm basically just dropping the balls into the paint and then pushing it into those nooks and crannies as best I can with the brush. And once that has dried, I'm mixing some Mississippi mud with water. And again, we've got a glove here, we've got a bowl, and I'm pouring that over the candle, and then I'm going to dab off any excess with a cloth. Here you really want to try to get it around the drips, so you don't want any spot that's between two drips to look clean. So you just want to keep working that in until it looks aged. And then I took a darker brown, a burnt umber, and I just poured that in a few little spaces just to give it a little bit more depth. So just a slightly different darker brown in just a few spaces. Now for the wicks, I have this black twine, which I think would look like a wick that's been burnt. And I'm just going to poke a hole in that area that I said was the top of each of my candle spheres. And I'm going to use a little bit of white glue, just drop a little bit into that hole, and then poke some of the black twine into the hole, and then trim it off so it looks like a short little wick. But for the black flame candle, I'm just going to cut a piece of black paper twist into the shape of a flame, and again use white glue and poke the end of the flame into that hole. And then once everything has dried, I just covered those with a coat of Mod Podge because we don't want that paint rubbing off on anything else. Now finally, I'd like to do book. And book, as you know, is made from skin sewn together. And book has an eye and a lot of sort of metal embellishment on it, including a metal clasp. We don't have a lot of space to work with here. So I'm going to do the skin and the eye and the metal clasp, and I'm going to use one of the wiffle balls. So to start, I'm just going to rip a thin paper bag into sort of randomish pieces. And this is basically just the base. This isn't the sewn skin or anything. This is just sort of a background for us. And I'm going to mix white glue with water and then just stick those all over the wiffle ball. Now for the eye, I have a ping pong ball here from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to cut that in half, knowing that I may need to cut it a little bit smaller, but we'll start with half the ping pong ball. And then I just used a compass to cut out a circle from painter's tape for the center of the eye for the iris, just because I thought it would help me paint a good circle there. And I'm going to start by painting the white part of the eye. So for the white part of the eye, I started with some white acrylic paint mixed with a little bit of that Mississippi mud, just to bring the color down and make it less white. And then for the blood vessels, I mixed a little bit of red with the white to get a sort of a pink, and I used a very fine brush to paint some blood vessels and to just sort of make it pink all around the edge as well. Then I removed my piece of tape, and for the iris, Book's iris looks like it's a sort of greenish color to me, and the only green I have is this Jubilee green. I mixed that with the Mississippi mud to get a much duller green, and I started with just that dull green. Now the eye has a darker color around the edge. So I mixed a darker brown in with the green and painted the edge of it. And then for flecks inside the eye, I used the Mississippi mud, and then I just painted the pupil with black. Once that had dried, I covered it with Mod Podge and let that dry. Now that really did stick too far off of my sphere, so I did trim it down, and then I used hot glue to attach it to the sphere, and then I used more of the paper to give it upper and lower lids. Now for the sewn skin parts of the book, I think what was most successful was a little bit of brown yarn sewing just through a piece of paper. So take a piece of paper, rip it in a random shape, try to bunch up the middle and sew the yarn through it in a sort of random pattern. I also tried some jute twine, but I just don't think that was as successful. It was difficult to sew, and the jute twine isn't as even. It's thicker in places and hairy. And so I feel like the yarn quote-unquote skin that I did was better. So once I had done those, I just decoupaged them to the ball. And now the final part of book would be the clasp around the eye. So I decided to make this out of air dry clay, and I made my own out of baking soda, cornstarch, and water. I do have a 2-minute technique on how to do that. And then I just fashioned the little pieces out of this. I tried to make very small flat pieces and then poked the holes in them, or the decoration in them, with a pencil tip. It's not going to be flat around the eye because this is a sphere, so it isn't going to look exactly like book, but it's a suggestion of what book looks like. And then I also made the sort of the clasp part, so I just tried to make it the correct shape with a hole in the middle for the gem and the hinge on the side. And I let those dry. Once those had dried, I painted them completely back and front with acrylic black paint. So this is the lowlights of it. Once that had dried, I brushed over all the pieces with this folk art gunmetal gray metallic paint. I did brush over some highlight locations with some silver paint. It's difficult to see that until it dries, but once it dries, it really does look like silver. Now for the gem, I have some yellow gel food coloring. I dropped that into the hole, and then I just put some hot glue on top of it. Where that yellow food coloring had maybe wicked out into the rest of the piece, I just painted over it again with the gunmetal gray. And then I used white glue to attach all the pieces around the eye. And that actually held them on very well. And then once all that had dried, I Mod Podged over the entire piece, except for the eyeball, which I had already Mod Podged, so I didn't go over that again. Now I had this frame that I made a few years ago. It's a couple of Dollar Tree frames and some other embellishments that I glued together and painted, and it was for an optical illusion. So I put a picture of Billy in there because I really enjoy that character, and I hadn't made any sort of sphere or orb for Billy. So here is the final result. I would love to know what you think. Please tell me in the comments. Tell me if you would have made different choices or made any of these orbs differently. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.